Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I've gotten the chance to talk with a couple of you, which has been really great. My name is Anastasia Shanahan. I am a rising senior at Thomas More College of Liberal Arts and a summer intern at the Luce Center. Today, I have the great honor of introducing our next speaker, Harmeet Dhillon. Harmeet is currently the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division in the U.S. Department of Justice, and this position is reflective of the lifelong commitment she has had to defending the rights of Americans. After graduating high school at 16, Harmeet attended Dartmouth College, where she was editor-in-chief of the Dartmouth Review, and then later graduated from the University of Virginia Law School, where she was editor of the Virginia Law Review. In 2006, Harmeet founded Dhillon Law Group Incorporated, a law firm dedicated to defending the rights of its clients, specifically in the areas of civil liberties, free speech, business, and political law. As a lawyer, Harmeet has received many awards, including the Outstanding Attorney Award in 2010, the Northern California Super Lawyer Award in 2011, and the Woman Leader in Law Award in 2012. In 2018, Harmeet founded the Center for American Liberty, an organization whose mission involves leveraging its nationwide network of attorneys to advocate for individual liberty and to combat illegal discrimination. Proudly shouldering cases that other organizations choose to ignore, the Center for American Liberty magnifies voices that defend minors from transgenderism, voices like Chloe Cole, Luca Hine, and Clementine Breen. Today, Harmeet is here not only as a woman of accomplishment, but as a woman of integrity. If there is one thing certain about Harmeet Dhillon, it is that she is a woman devoted to justice. Justice for the people whose voices go unheard, justice for the people whose voices are forcibly silenced, and justice that defends the inalienable rights of all American people. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Harmeet Dhillon.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome, and thank you all for being here today. Kimberly Begg asked me to step up and join you for this event, and I've known Kimberly for many years and respected her as a leader and even been a lawyer representing her organization in the past, and so it's an honor to support this organization and share some thoughts about my career. All of you ladies are here because you have the ability to be here. You're free. That's something that we take for granted here in the United States, but so many young women like you around the world don't have the opportunity to even finish high school, much less decide what kind of career you're going to have, go to events unchaperoned, or have any of these opportunities to think and dream about how you're going to design the rest of your life. And so I don't take that for granted, and I hope you appreciate as well the beautiful gifts that God has given all of us here in this room. Everyone here in this room is a little different than the mainstream, quite frankly, because you refuse to buy into the lie that men and women are identical, that male and female are merely social constructs that are assigned at birth, and that carry connotations of oppression, exploitation, and patriarchy. That's the kind of garbage I heard a lot in college. I'm sure you're hearing it at an even younger age, but I think all of you are here in this room because you know that's not true. You accept natural truth instead of engaging in the type of mental gymnastics about the genders and the sexes that are currently in vogue amongst all of your peers. You know that you don't have to choose between family and career, and that all people, whether in the womb or out of the womb, deserve equal protection under the law. So I want to begin by asking the questions that many of you may already be asking. Can I pursue a career, a life I believe in, while remaining true to the values that matter to me the most? Not just values or looks that look good on Instagram or LinkedIn, not just something to make your parents, your family, your friends impressed, but values and a career path that align with who you are, with your faith, with your family goals, and with your deep-held convictions about what truly matters in life. I didn't come here to give you a lecture or a talk about balance. If you were to ask my staffers who work with me at the Department of Justice, they would tell you they're giving me lectures about balance all the time because I probably don't have a very balanced life. So this isn't about juggling or managing your calendar better. It's about building a life that aligns with who you are and doing that despite the challenges and all the voices surrounding you that tell you how you can't. What I've learned over the years in the courtroom and in my life in the public realm is that it is possible to build a career that reflects your deepest values, but it won't happen by accident and it isn't easy. The moment you choose to speak your mind, particularly if that mind differs from the public reality, you can be dismissed as out of touch. I've often been told, Harmeet, as a woman, there's always the as a woman people out there telling you what you should be thinking as a woman, as if as a woman you can't think for yourself. As a woman, Harmeet, you're not really for women, or you've internalized the misogyny of American society. But what I and most of you likely believe as well is in personal responsibility, in faith, in family, as the backbone of a healthy society. And I refuse to hide my beliefs and what I believe is important as a goal to make others feel comfortable. That's not a burden I have to carry, and it's never been one that I've been willing to shoulder. And I'll tell you in the next few minutes about how I came to be here and offer some lessons that I've learned along the way. Hopefully this may help you as well. The clarity of knowing who you are is really important to taking those next steps forward and being able to reach your goals. And for me, I was blessed by having that conviction start very early. I was born in India to a military background family on both sides. My dad was a young doctor, and India was a socialist country at the time. And he did not want to raise his young family in a country where your opportunities were limited, where the government told you how many children you could have, and where things could change and there was very little control over your life. So he chose to seek to finish his education abroad and to bring his young family abroad. And so I'm really grateful for that. Dad settled down in a rural community in North Carolina to practice as an orthopedic surgeon and raise his family in a place where he felt that there were conservative values in the community. My parents were new to America. They didn't really think that much about the different regions and, you know, some of the social stresses that might have occurred in these societies. And my dad wore a turban, my brother wears a turban. I had a different name and dressed a little differently, and a religion that nobody had heard of in our small town in rural North Carolina. And yet, despite these challenges, what I heard from as early as I can recall is that America is a place. I remember my dad telling me, you know, whenever I would complain about something, he's like, listen, America is a place where anybody can become anything, and you need to take advantage of that, young lady. You need to be the best you can be and, you know, stop complaining and understand how lucky you are that God has blessed you to bring you here. And so I heard that lesson loud and clear, and I saw it in my mom and dad's example. Now, in my family and my culture, just about everybody had gone into science. So I had two grandfathers who were doctors. My dad was a doctor, a lot of even aunts and uncles who were doctors as well. And so I was pre-med when I went to Dartmouth. And, you know, I feel like throughout my life, there have been these episodes where God has placed a rock in my path that ends up changing my life for the better. And that happened when I went to Dartmouth. And so I started out thinking I was going to go to medical school and, you know, just be pre-med, do my organic chemistry and all of that stuff. But I went to Dartmouth, and as I was moving into the only girls' dormitory, because my parents are pretty conservative, they wanted me to live in the girls-only dormitory. So as I was moving into the only girls' dormitory at Dartmouth, you know, I had a box in my hands, and a guy was going in front of me helping somebody else move, and he let the door slam in my face. And you know, I was from the rural South, and in the South, men would open the door for you and hold the door and, you know, make sure that that would not happen. So I was pretty miffed, you know, about this whole situation. And this newspaper was on my stoop, and so I picked up the paper and I wrote a letter to the editor about how I'd come from North Carolina and, you know, encountered these Yankees with no manners, and I was very disappointed. And so, you know, the editor of that paper reached out to me and asked me to write for the paper. And that was the editor of the Dartmouth Review. And so that began my entire career in conservative media and as an activist in the conservative movement, because some jerk let the door slam in my face. So I'm grateful to that jerk, because otherwise I'd probably be a doctor and none of you would ever have heard of me or want to hear my life lessons. So Some of my predecessors included Laura Ingraham, Dinesh D'Souza, and many other prominent journalists, writers for the Wall Street Journal today. And back in that time, similar to today, in the 1980s, there was a lot of turmoil on the college campus. Today the shanties are pro-Palestinian shanties. Well, back then they were anti-apartheid shanties, but we had shanties on the green, and all the students were protesting about these issues. Our newspaper was constantly in trouble with the administration for the articles that we wrote and the causes that we held up. I went undercover one time to do a sting operation of our medical facility that was giving out RU 486, which is the unapproved abortion pill, morning after pill. And so that made national headlines when just went in and said, hey, I did something with my boyfriend last night and I need the pill. And they said, sure. They offered me this pill as a 17-year-old. And, that made national news. And my parents were a little surprised to read about what I was up to in college in the national newspapers. That was not on the agenda of what they had sent me to college for, but they were proud of me in the end. So things got worse with the college, and we ended up suing Dartmouth because Dartmouth suspended 3 of my colleagues at the newspaper for an article we wrote criticizing a music professor. So I had the New York Times and 60 Minutes and all these other institutions of the national news media descend on Hanover, New Hampshire to interview me, the then editor-in-chief of the newspaper. And I had to stand up for free speech on college campus in the United States. And so that was a pretty heavy challenge early on. But with the help of my friends, and back in the day, the American Civil Liberties Union used to care about free speech, and they sent us a lawyer to help us, and we ended up winning. So from that experience of taking on the battle of free speech on college campus, which was, again, an accident of circumstance, I decided I wasn't going to be a doctor anymore. I thought it was pretty cool that a lawyer could come from out of town and help some 19 and 20-year-olds sue their school and win. I thought that was pretty awesome, and I wanted to do that as my career. So that's the path that I ended up taking. And again, it's because someone was a jerk, someone was wrong, someone treated us badly, and we rose to the challenge. And so I'm really grateful for those people who put those obstacles in my path because they brought me to where I am today and who I am. Now, changing from medicine to law was one of the difficult conversations with my family because in India, where I was born and came from, law is a fairly disreputable practice. It is not an honored profession. The only thing worse than being a lawyer is being a politician. And imagine my parents' surprise when I ended up doing both of those things. And so, they did support me, but there were some conversations about that. But ultimately they supported me because they saw that I was passionate about it and they loved me. And so my early career was the kind of career that a lot of conservatives pursue. Usually people go get a federal clerkship, they do all the things, go to a good law school, get a federal clerkship, go to a big law firm where you get a big salary, and work your way up to partner where you toil in obscurity for 30 or 40 years, making a lot of money, and quite frankly, not doing a lot of good for the world. And so that's the traditional career path, and that's the only career path available to a successful lawyer in 1993. Very little other chances. I was married at the time, and I was supporting my husband doing his medical residency. And so, we took that path. And I lived on the Upper East Side of New York, buying designer goods, having a Hampton share. Ann Coulter and I shared a Hampton share one summer. That was interesting. And it was a good life for a while. And then I suddenly had some crises of conscience after opportunity to do good was, my goodness, my law firm is on the other side of that. And so I began thinking about how I could align my moral life, my internal moral life, with my personal goals. And so I did that. Ultimately, I skip a lot of stuff along the way, but I just couldn't take it anymore at a certain point, and I quit big law. I was living in San Francisco at the time, and started my own law firm, the Dhillon Law Group, from scratch. It was just me. Started knocking on doors, got some clients, came to the attention of some people who wanted to hire me, got together with some other lawyers. At the time I left the Dhillon Law Group earlier this year, it had 40 employees and 5 offices throughout the United States, and clients included the United States President, Tucker Carlson, and X Corporation, and many other big names. And so I'm really proud of that accomplishment, and it's something that I did with the help of a lot of people along the way. But the critical rock was being miserable in big law, and with a lot of money and a good salary and safety and prestige. And I just, there was a lot of noise inside my head saying, this is not right. And I listened to that voice, and I took this path, and it worked out. And I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to do that. I didn't have a backup plan, so it was risky. But I knew that I had to align my personal life with my personal values. And so I've had the privilege now for 2/3 of my career to be doing good with my law license. And that is a true privilege. Every day I wake up and I feel excited about the people I'm going to represent and the work I'm going to do and the wrongs I'm going to right. And when President Trump asked me to take on this position as the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights because of my decades of work in civil rights, I immediately said yes. And it's a real honor to work with Attorney General Pam Bondi and with the President and further his agenda. And I can't tell you how exciting it is every day to get up and go into work. But many of you may ask, how did a lawyer in San Francisco end up fighting for conservative values? And it wasn't easy to leave that traditional career path and head in this direction. But you have to be willing to shut out the noise at cocktail parties and the raised eyebrows and the mocking comments, and just be true to who you are. And luckily I've had the opportunity to do that. Being a trial lawyer is a difficult job for any of you who are thinking about going to law school and becoming lawyers. Being a woman trial lawyer is an even more difficult job. Of the people who own law firms of my size in the United States who are women, there are almost none. And that's not a big firm, but it's a challenge. But I'm really fueled every day, despite those challenges, by my love for the United States Constitution, a truly incredible document. If I could hug the First Amendment, I love the First Amendment. It is really a fire that keeps me burning every day. To be at this place in my career where I get to stand up for the rights of young women, this week, it's been a long week at the DOJ, but on Wednesday I sued my home state of California for allowing boys to take girls' trophies. It's pretty awesome to be able to do that. And all of the challenges I've had in my life brought me to that position to be able to do that. And I'm not sure there are a lot of other lawyers who would do that because, it's an out there position. I've gotten attacked quite a bit, but everyone in this room knows we're right. And I think ultimately the law is going to agree with us as well. I love the ability to stand up and defend the right of all of us to bear arms. That's an important right. And the United States Department of Justice, for the first time, Civil Rights Division is going to have a Second Amendment section. So we're going to be standing up for the rights of every woman in this room to be able to go get their concealed carry permit if they want. And I encourage you to do that and be able to defend yourselves. And so there's so many other rights that we get to fight for. So far in the DOJ, I mentioned one of the things we've done. We've also opened up investigations regarding DEI in college admissions that in 73 major universities, law schools, medical schools, nursing schools, and other institutions of higher learning here in the United States to check whether they're complying with Students for Fair Admissions and offering equal opportunity to everybody in the United States. We're investigating Washington State's anti-Catholic law that forces priests to break the seal of confession in violation of their absolute sacred duty to maintain that confidentiality. That's illegal under the First Amendment, and we're not going to let that happen. We're investigating religious discrimination by cities against houses of worship of all different faiths throughout the United States. And we're defending one person, one vote, and the right of every American citizen to have their vote counted equally and only with other American citizens throughout the United States. It's crazy that in 2025, the DOJ has to file lawsuits to do that, but we are, and we will. So it's the honor of a lifetime for me to serve the United States and this president and all of you as the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. And I know that some of you may be interested in a career in law or politics. I've skipped over a lot of my career. You've probably seen a few other things out there. But before I take questions, let me give you a few final parting thoughts. I encourage all of you to identify and find mentors who will help you along in your career. And they don't have to look like you. Some of my best mentors, because they were the only ones available, were not even women. But find those mentors Avoid friends who suck your energy. This is something I learned in my 30s. I didn't learn it earlier, so I wasted a lot of time listening to a lot of sad sacks, and it was a good lesson to learn to avoid the energy vampires. Take opportunities and risks with your life and your career within reason, and they will often pay off. But always remain true to your values. I didn't have any lawyers in my family, but Laura Ingram was a friend of mine who I met through the Dartmouth Review, and she happened to be in law school with me at the same time. She sat down with me when I joined UVA, and she told me, you need to get onto the law review. You need to have good grades. Not the environmental justice law review or the criminal law review, the law review. You need to do well, and you need to get a federal clerkship. She was pretty no-nonsense about it. That was great advice, and I'm grateful for Laura for giving me some tough love early in my career. I had a mentor at my first law firm. They paired me up with a partner who had studied ancient Greek and Latin like I had majored in at Dartmouth. And he had nothing in common with me. He was Jewish, he was older, he was a Democrat, but he was a tremendous mentor. And he taught me the discipline I needed to be a great lawyer early on in my career. And I'm grateful for Jeremy Epstein and his leadership. So always find those mentors. About taking those opportunities that scare you, maybe. One of those challenges was representing the president in the 2024 election. When my partner, David Warrington, who's now the White House counsel, came to me and asked me about that, I said, Dave, we have 10 partners, and any of us can end up getting indicted for simply representing the president if we lose. So we better win this. We better make sure that everyone's comfortable with this. So all the partners had to take a vote, even though I owned the law firm. It was my decision. All the partners took a vote. I had to persuade my husband, he's a super MAGA, but wasn't nuts about me getting indicted, But we all stepped up, and we decided it was worth the challenge. And one of those gambles in my life that really paid off, and I'm grateful. But that's the level of fear that was going through the American legal profession just a year ago, 2 years ago, that maybe you might lose your law license for stepping up to represent the President of the United States, if you can believe that or not. So that's an example of a risk, and a risk that was rewarded. And finally, staying grounded in your values. You're here in this room, which is a step ahead of many young women who are your peers, because you recognize that spending time in a place like this today with other women with similar goals is beneficial to you. You're grounded, and you're living out those principles. Don't be shy about spreading those principles in places that you study and places that you work. You would be surprised how popular those principles are, but particularly women, we're often coached socially to hide our light. We're often coached to try to fit in. The peer pressure by other women is intense. And never let those other women or boys or men stop you from being who you are. Who you are is good. I was very blessed. My husband passed away last year, but for 16 years, I was blessed to have a very supportive husband who, without his support and love, I could not be who I am today standing here and talking to you. So I'm grateful to have had that. I encourage all of you to find that and go forth and be the unapologetic version of womanhood that God has given you and make America great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your fascinating perspective as a successful conservative businesswoman and a woman working at the White House. It's just such an incredible honor. We'll have questions now. So again, please state your name, school, and organization.
Hi, my name is Katie Kenline. I just graduated from Grove City College. And are you willing to speak about Section 230 and what you think about the balance between duty of care and keeping child sexual abuse materials off of platforms versus a lot of people talk about that shielding big tech is necessary for free speech and for small businesses. Are you willing to talk about that issue?
Well, I can talk about it at a high level. I've done a lot of litigation involving Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And, the problem with the act in a way is that it was passed in 1996 to protect a nascent industry of the internet. This is before many of you were born, but some of us had to dial the internet on a telephone and hear it until the phone rang and picked up, and there was no X or Instagram or any of that. In fact, probably all of you are of that age. I have shoes older than most of you. But the problem is that the law hasn't been updated to reflect the current reality. I don't think Google needs protection from the federal government anymore. I don't think that these internet providers need that. And so I have advocated to members of Congress to update the law, and I'll just leave it at that. I think it needs to be reformed. It is way out of date.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm kind of tall. Hi, I'm Tatiana Cole. I go to Florida State University, and I'm an intern for Senator Rick Scott, so I'm from Florida. I would just love to hear your thoughts on kind of the debate on whether or not to go to law school. I find that in political spaces, my father's a lawyer. I've always wanted to go to law school, but I'm constantly discouraged by many people not to do it, that it's not worth it. So I would just love to hear what your take on that is.
Well, I'm guilty as charged because my special assistant, Deborah Cumby, wants to go to law school. She's my helper at the DOJ. She's in the room here, and I'm constantly trying to talk her out of it. But I digress. The actual advice is that you should absolutely go to law school if you want to be a lawyer. And if you want to go to law school because you're not sure what you want to do with your life, it's a bad idea. Being a lawyer is hard. It's also expensive, and it's 3 years. And the traditional career path is kind of limiting. I mean, when I started practicing law, it's different from young women now, but it was hard to make. It's still hard to make partner. I take that back. Still hard to make partner at a big law firm. And it's hard to balance. Work-life balance is a challenge. But if you want to be a lawyer, what I strongly encourage every young person is don't go straight from college to law school. Work in the legal profession for 1 or 2 years. I encourage young people to do that at my law firm. I hire a lot of paralegals and interns, and 50% of them decide they don't want to go to law school after experiencing it's not like the glamour you see on television. It's not trials all day long. It's a lot of drudgery, a lot of negativity. So you should be sure before you make that 3-year and multi-$100,000 investment that that's what you want to do.
Thank you so much,
Yep.
and thank you for all you've done.
Hi, thank you. My name's Lucy Spence. I'm a student at Notre Dame, and I'm interning at the Daily Signal this summer. My question is about your time at Dartmouth as the editor of the Dartmouth Review. I'll be the editor-in-chief at the Irish Rover this coming school year, which is the conservative paper at Notre Dame. We got sued a couple years ago and won the case a couple weeks ago, but since then, no one is really willing to talk to us, professors, student leaders, things like that, when we're doing investigative pieces. And I'm just wondering what you did when you were at Dartmouth to combat that and address that issue.
Well, our newspaper was the guerrilla newspaper. I was on Jake Tapper's show the other day talking about my law school, and it made me remember that Jake Tapper was a cartoonist of the Maine newspaper, and he did some pretty mean caricatures of me. So there's always going to be circumstances where there's 2 different camps and 2 different viewpoints, and we did quite a bit of undercover journalism at the Dartmouth Review. We would wait outside shady professors' homes and see what they were up to, and there's some tabloid journalism going on for sure. I had a lot of fun in college. And so I think that's the benefit of it, being a journalist. If you want to be a good journalist, you got to take some risks. And by the way, unlike when I was in law school, you have the opportunity, and when I was in college, you have the opportunity to hire a lawyer. You will undoubtedly be, and I can help you afterwards, you find a local lawyer who's willing to help you pro bono, give you some legal advice. There are laws about wiretapping and laws about surveillance and things like that. You can get a lawyer to help you in advance to make sure you aren't crossing the boundaries of the law, but definitely push the envelope. I see a lot of conservative journalism is pretty safe, and a lot of journalism, period, is simply regurgitating the work product of people who actually are taking risks. So get some advice, take some risks, and I think you'll do just fine.
Thank you.
All right.
Hi, my name is Gabriela Macias. I study at the University of San Diego, and I intern at ALEC right now for the summer. So I just want to start off by saying that, being from California and seeing someone who is succeeding in law, which is what I want to do, and like doing it with your conservative values was just so remarkable for me to see as a public figure. My question is, with what you know now, what advice do you have for someone who wants to get in constitutional law and the type of law that you do?
That's a great question. So when I started out coming out of law school, I really mean it. There were no conservative nonprofits where you can go to get a job doing good and being a lawyer. That's not true today. Today, there are a number of different legal organizations that are being funded by conservative donors. And like my nonprofit hires young lawyers. You know, it's ideal to get a couple of years of really good training at a DA's office or a big law firm. You get good training there, but don't spend your whole career doing that because it's quite limiting. So I would encourage that, you know. I do also encourage federal clerkships. I think they're a tremendous experience, or state clerkships. Any clerkship with a judge is a very good experience in writing. I encourage going to the best possible law school you can get into. That's also important because there's a big fall off in your career portability between the top schools and the bottom quartile of the schools. And network relentlessly with people who, I mean, don't just be a user, but network with people who can help you get ahead, who go to Federalist Society events, if you're a Republican, go to Republican lawyers events, go to events, specialty bar events involving the particular practice area that you're interested in. I did domestic violence volunteer work in law school. I was a victim of domestic violence in my first marriage, and so that was my passion to do that. And so whatever it is that you identify with, get that experience, and you will find so many doors open to you. But if you just sort of study and, kind of have a narrow focus, it really limits your opportunities. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And that will be our final question. I think we've got some time for photos now.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much, all of you.